Brad Holmes has been one of the best general managers in football since the day he stepped foot in Detroit. The back-to-back executive of the year for both 2023 and 2024 is looking to make it a three-peat in 2025. He's rebuilt this Detroit Lions team from a laughingstock at the bottom of the barrel in the NFC to a true powerhouse across the NFL, and he's done so primarily through the NFL draft. With 5 draft classes under his belt and 29 prospects we've had the opportunity to watch play and contribute to this roster, which one is the best and which player is the absolute worst? That is what we'll be taking a look at in today's video. But before we do, go down below, take a look at the comment section and grade each and every pick for yourself. Make a list of the 29 players and then compare it to my list as we go through. Let me know the worst player Brad Holmes has ever drafted, the best player Brad Holmes has ever drafted, and what players you think are maybe over or underrated from this video. I'd love to hear your opinions and love to hear what the community thinks of Brad Holmes' drafting strategies. With that being said, let's kick it off with the very worst pick that Brad Holmes has ever made, likely the consensus one, the 29, Broderick Martin. A player that's only played 5 games for the Detroit Lions, made a single start, and has 4 combined tackles in his career. A player that was never supposed to contribute early, right? He was a ball of clay prospect, a 6'6", 355-pound ball of clay that Brad Holmes was hoping they could shape into an all-pro nose tackle. Unfortunately, with 3 years under his belt, just 5 games played and 4 tackles in those 5 games, that doesn't seem to be becoming a reality. With the drafting of Tyleik Williams, the retaining of DJ Reader, the return of Eli McNeel, Mekhi Wingo, Roy Lopez, Levi Anuzerque, and even guys like Pat O'Connor and Miles Adams, he has been pretty much buried and suffocated in this depth chart. There is no path to playing time for Broderick Martin, and for a player that was sacrificing 3 late-round picks to trade up at the back end of the 3rd, this does feel like one of the very few large misses that Brad Holmes has had his out-through career. Now, do I think Brad Holmes has missed on a lot of picks? No. I think there are 2 players you could truly say are misses in this time with Detroit, but Broderick Martin is certainly one of them. The other, at 28, is James Mitchell, a player that, funnily enough, has never had a target go his way and not made the reception. 13 targets, the 13 catches on his career, 141 yards, and a singular touchdown as a receiver. Now, James Mitchell, despite being perfect from a target to catch ratio, only saw 13 targets throughout his 2 seasons in Detroit. He saw his lone touchdown on a Sunday afternoon game versus the Green Bay Packers in week 7 of 2021. It was a go-ahead touchdown and the only touchdown scored by the Detroit Lions in that entire game. It was a big momentum swinging game for the Lions to go from their 2-6 start to their 9-8 finish in 2022. And really, you could say that the turnaround began with James Mitchell, a player that always caught the football, had really strong hands, and was able to stretch the field, but for one reason or another saw very low production numbers and very few volume metrics. This is the only other player I truly think Brad Holmes missed on. It is a 5th round selection, so it's hard to really be too upset, but a player that had the opportunity to be a field stretcher, a player that really never had a bad rep in Detroit from the passing game, is a player that was, I think, misused by the coaching staff, mishandled by the Detroit Lions, and a player that I thought had a true potential to break out last year or even the year before, but unfortunately was released at the end of the preseason and has yet to find another home in the NFL. At 27, I have Jamar Jefferson. The 7th round pick from 2021 has actually contributed a lot more than most 7th round picks have the opportunity to do. 9 games for the Detroit Lions where he's seen 21 carries, 96 yards, and 2 touchdowns on the ground with 5 receptions and 33 yards to pair with it. Jamar is a good running back. Jamar Jefferson is a very solid player for this Detroit Lions roster and was a player that at one point in time was looked at as maybe a developmental running back for the future. He saw a few carries in his rookie season, whereas primarily most of his carries and targets have come from, but he really hasn't done much in the last few seasons. He's a great running back depth piece in the preseason. He's a great player to keep on the practice squad. He's a player the Lions absolutely love to have in the building, but just never a guy that's going to play, right? He's been buried under Jamir Gibbs, been buried under David Montgomery, under Sion Vake, under Craig Reynolds, and at best case is your running back 5 on the roster. That is a player that is never going to see time without significant injuries to the position, and no offense to Jamar Jefferson, I hope that never happens. I hope we never see him have to take a large, significant amount of carries in an NFL game. But if he does, he's done okay. 21 carries for 96 yards and 2 touchdowns, averaging nearly 4 yards per carry is not a bad thing for an NFL running back. And, 2 touchdowns on 21 carries is a good touchdown to carry ratio. He's a good player. He's a solid runner, and I do think if the Lions absolutely had to rely on him, they could make it work. But obviously, we don't want that to happen because he's just not as explosive, nor is he as prevalent as some of the other players on this roster. But for a 7th-round pick, far from a miss. At 26, I have the Lions' former 7th-round pick as well in Antoine Green, a player that stood at 6'2", 215 pounds, a field stretcher, a dynamic weapon in the preseason, and a player with some truly spectacular highlight plays, but it never really came to light in the regular season. 9 games played, 2 targets, and a single reception for 2 yards on Thursday Night Football versus the Seahawks. It was not a good look for Antoine Green's career. He had some promise. He had some great plays in the preseason, especially pairing up with Teddy Bridgewater. But after suffering a concussion in the first game of his 2nd ever preseason, Antoine Green's career looks to potentially be over. He was waived by the Detroit Lions just a few days ago and is yet to find a team elsewhere in the league. His health is, of course, the number one concern. And it's a real shame because I do think he had a lot of talent and I do think he had some promise in the NFL. I thought he could have been a very strong wide receiver 4, wide receiver 5 for the Detroit Lions a few years into his career. And while that may have been true, it seems as though his time in Detroit is over and potentially his NFL career as well. Moving on to 25, I have the Detroit Lions 5th-round pick from 2023 in Colby Sorsdale. Made 2 starts as a rookie, played 253 snaps and allowed 2 sacks on the year. Played fantastic against the Raiders and actually started a game in the playoffs for the Detroit Lions in which they were able to find victory. But in 2024, he did not play a single game. Didn't get a single snap on the offensive line. And now with the drafting of guys like Miles Frazier, Tate Ratledge, and of course, Christian Mahogany, he is not going to play a lot of football. He is incredibly versatile. I think can stand up and play some good football when it matters, but I don't think we'll have the opportunity in Detroit. Could potentially be a late round trade target for a team at the end of the preseason looking for guard depth, but I think Colby Sorsdale's time in Detroit is over, and unfortunately, he didn't contribute a lot to this football team. At 24, I have a player that actually hasn't played a game yet, a player that hasn't taken a start in Giovani Manu. At the 24th slot, you might ask why he's ahead of guys like Colby Sorsdale, why he's ahead of guys like Antoine Green, who've actually played in the NFL regular season, and this is mostly based off his preseason. I thought he was phenomenal in the preseason. Of course, made some mistakes, but I thought looked really good. His size and his athleticism are a scary duo, and I do think truly that Giovani Manu will be a starter in this league. He has the talent to do so. He has the coaching staff around him to mold him, and I'm really excited to see what he does in the preseason. I'm excited to see if he took that next step forward in pass protection, if he took that next step forward with his footwork and his handwork and is really ready to step in as an NFL player, or if there is still room yet to grow. Even with that being said, I thought his preseason was encouraging enough to put him over guys like Colby Sorsdale, Antoine Green, and the rest, but not high enough to put him maybe higher on this list. If he ends up starting, he could get much higher on this list, but of course, until then, he is stuck at the bottom of the roster. 23, a very similar story with Sion Vake, a 4th-round pick, and the pick very directly after a guy like Giovani Manu. In the preseason, at 10 rushes for 51 yards and 4 receptions for 60 yards. He's a dynamic playmaker. He is a versatile weapon. I think he will eventually be the running back 3 in Detroit and maybe even the running back 2 after David Montgomery's time has come and gone. But for right now, I think he has had an encouraging preseason. Didn't take a carry in the regular season, but I thought was really good on special teams, contributed there, and will contribute on offense at some point throughout his career. They just have to be patient and watch him grow. Overall, a good special teams contributor early, but not a big playmaker on the offense or the defense, which of course is what you are looking for. I have Mekhi Wingo a little bit higher than that at the 22nd overall spot. With 3 pressures and a limited role on the defensive line, he is a pass rusher. He is small, but he is quick, he is feisty, and he is versatile. Didn't record a single sack on the season last year as a rookie, but played in some big moments, had a couple of key pressures, and actually was quite good for the Detroit Lions of what he was asked to do. The injury cut his rookie season short, but I do expect him to return to an even higher standard than a year ago. And again, he's only played 9 games. He's only played a few snaps for the Detroit Lions. I think his future is incredibly bright with 3 years left on his deal, and I expect to see more out of Mekhi Wingo next season that could potentially raise him up on this list. Taking a look at 21, I have Chase Lucas, a key special teams contributor for the Detroit Lions for 3 seasons under the Honolulu Blue. He is a guy that I think the Lions really liked. I think a guy the Lions really wanted to keep around, but took a pretty large contract for a 7th-round pick to go over to San Francisco and do the same thing he was doing in Detroit. He is a good football player. He's not a key defensive guy. He's not going to be a starting member in your secondary, but he is going to be a key player that sticks around in the NFL for 10 years, makes millions of dollars doing what he does on special teams, and he was a good pick in the 7th round. He was a good, reliable player on that special teams, which isn't something every 7th-round pick can say. And again, much like Jamar Jefferson, I think he's accomplished a lot more than most 7th-round picks are able to do, and based off the risk versus the return of a 7th-round pick to what they got, he was a really good value and a really good player in Detroit. At pick 20, taking a look at the final part of this list, I have Josh Pascal, who truly has been underwhelming for the Lions. Has played 36 games, has 62 tackles, has 12.5 TFLs and 5 sacks, but as a former 2nd-round pick, the 46th overall in the entire draft class, you often expect more. He's suffered with injuries. He's not the most prolific pass rusher. While he's an excellent edge setter and a great run defender, those aren't really things that are going to put you high on an NFL list, right? Josh Pascal is always going to be remembered by NFL fans as kind of a bust, right? Kind of a player that never lived up to the potential that he may have had or the expectations that fans may have placed on him. I personally think he's a very good player. I think he will get a 2nd contract in Detroit. I think he will return to the Lions as a solid run defender, but for what they spent on him to what they've gotten back, there is quite a bit more to be desired. And I think he's been a very underwhelming player, which is why he finds himself below guys that have played less games, have maybe contributed less to the team, but have exceeded expectations more than Josh Pascal has been able to do. At 19, taking a look at the first number in the teens, I have Ennis Rakestraw, the 2nd-year player from Missouri, had a great preseason, but was injured in the 2nd week of his rookie year. He was projected to start. He was projected to be the number 1 nickel cornerback in week 2 versus Tampa Bay before tearing his hamstring in warmups. It was a tough injury to suffer. It kept him out for the entirety of the year. With a full season and a full offseason of recovery, a full offseason program, and time to get back on the field, I think he will be not only a starter, but a star player in the Detroit Lions secondary, bringing physicality, bringing a great sense of just pressure in the interior of that secondary and in that defense. And I think he's going to be a really good player, barring his health concerns. If he's healthy, I think he will be a very good player, but until he shows that on the field, it's really hard to put him over some of the other guys on this list. At 18, I have Henden Hooker, 29 for 44 in the preseason, 300 yards and 1 touchdown to 1 interception. Does have a touchdown on the ground as well. Doesn't look like the Henden Hooker from Tennessee, but I think being a 3rd-round pick, he looks like a reliable backup quarterback. He looks like a player that the Lions can rely on. And that being said, I think he's an okay player for Detroit. There isn't a whole lot to say because he's never started or played a snap in the regular season. It is quite concerning that they keep bringing in veteran quarterbacks to start behind Jared Goff if there is a minor injury and Jared is out for a few plays. But I think the long-term development is still potentially there for Henden. I'm excited to see what he does in year 2. And I do think he'll be a very good backup quarterback for a long time in Detroit. And that is a good pick in the 3rd round, in my opinion, for filling out a roster with its biggest weakness. At 17, I have James Houston, the 1-year, 9-game wonder for the Detroit Lions. Played 7 games as a rookie, had 8 sacks, was 2nd in the NFL in rookie sacks in the 2022 season, only behind Aiden Hutchinson. His future was so incredibly bright in Detroit and so incredibly bright in the NFL. And unfortunately, that injury he suffered on a special teams rep in the 2nd week of his 2nd year pretty much ended his career. He never came back with the same amount of burst, never came back with the same amount of bend, never came back with the same amount of playmaking ability, and unfortunately was cut by the Detroit Lions, was picked up by the Cleveland Browns, and I think has since been brought back into free agency. He was excellent, and I think the 7 games that he contributed to were massive in the Detroit Lions. Culture shift was massive in the Detroit Lions, finishing strong that year and almost making the playoffs, but his limited contributions after that keep him far below the other players on this list. Christian Mahogany, a player that was fantastic for the Lions through 2 games of his career, is maybe higher than a lot of people would want to see. With an 81.6 PFF grade and 75 snaps allowing 0 sacks, he was excellent in the playoffs. He was excellent in Chicago. I think he's going to slide in as a long-term starter at the Detroit Lions. And I've seen enough to say that with confidence. I've seen enough to say he will be a star player in Detroit. He will be a star player for the Detroit Lions. You just need to give him some more time. You need to give him next season, and he is going to start, play well, and be a superstar on that line, keeping it strong, healthy, cheap, and young for the foreseeable future. At number 15, getting into the top half of this list, Ifeatu Melifonwu. 37 games played, 72 tackles, 6 TFLs, 4.5 sacks, 1 forced fumble, 2 fumble recoveries, and 2 interceptions. It always felt as though Ifeatu was making a difference on the field. Every time he saw the field, good things would happen for the Detroit Lions defense. Now, was he on the field very often? No. He had a lot of injury concerns, missed most of last season, missed most of his sophomore season, missed most of his rookie season. But when he was on the field, he was excellent. He contributed to the Detroit Lions' first NFC North title in franchise history, had a game-sealing interception in that game, and truly is one of my favorite players of the Brad Holmes regime. Is he the best player? Absolutely not. Is my bias showing? Probably a little bit. But I do think he was super impactful, and a player that seals the franchise's first division crown ever is going to make it pretty high on this list, regardless of what else he contributed. And even at that, he contributed quite a bit. At number 14, I have the Detroit Lions' former 6th-round pick and arguably the last true great steal of Brad Holmes in Malcolm Rodriguez. 43 games played, 151 tackles, 10 TFLs, 3 sacks, and a fumble recovery. He was great as a rookie. He had 87 tackles his first season with the Detroit Lions, which led the draft class that season with tackles and TFLs, if I'm not mistaken. He is a player that has since taken a backseat to Jack Campbell and Alex Anzalone and Derek Barnes, but is still a reliable special teams contributor, is still a reliable depth piece on this defense, and a player that I really think, if push came to shove, the Lions could rely on. Tore his ACL in 2024, which is, of course, really upsetting to see for such a good young player, but he should return to the Detroit Lions at worst by mid-season and could potentially find himself back in the lineup, back in the rotation, and finding himself a good spot when he eventually does return. The highest player I have on this list that most people would disagree with is Levi Anuzerque, a player that I have as the 13th best player ever drafted by Brad Holmes, a player that suffered through injuries early in his career, but last season finally started putting it together. 16 games after playing 10 games the season prior. He had 1.5 sacks, 13 quarterback hits, a forced fumble, and 22 quarterback pressures. Was second on the team in QB pressures and first on the team from the interior of that defensive line. He is a game wrecker. He is a player that consistently puts pressure on the quarterback up the middle. He is a versatile piece. You can play on the outside. You can play on the inside. He is a good player. And I know the injuries have held him back early in his career, but after really his first true healthy season, he put up really good numbers, really good pressures. I think him coming back is a good thing for the Lions, and I wouldn't be surprised if we saw another pretty solid step forward to maybe Levi putting up 3, 4, even 5 sacks from the interior, especially in the absence of Eli McNeel. At the 12th best player, I have the Lions' most recent first-round pick that we have seen play in Teriana Arnold. A rookie season that saw him total 60 tackles, 10 passes defended, a fumble recovery, and a 55% completion rate against. He struggled early with pass interference. He struggled early with the penalties. He struggled with a number of things getting to the NFL level. But at the end of the year, he was playing lights-out football. That last game against Minnesota, he was phenomenal. 6 targets, 0 receptions, and 2 passes defended. He didn't come away with an interception, but those will come with time. I think he grew a lot through his rookie season from week 1 to week 17, even into the playoff game. I thought he was a completely different player in the best ways possible. He got much better with his hand use, got much better with grabbing and pass interferences, and I think will grow even more in his second year. He'll grow even more in a secondary and will be even more reliable in his second year of Detroit Lions football. His rookie season was super encouraging, and I'm really excited to see the leap he can take in year 2. Derek Barnes is the next player on this list at number 11. 205 career tackles, 12 TFLs, 4 sacks, a forced fumble, and 2 passes defended. Recently got a brand new contract renewed with the Detroit Lions. A 3-year, $25.5 million contract to return off the torn MCL. He is a difference maker in Detroit. He is a leader. He brings intensity. He brings everything you want from the defensive side of things as a linebacker. He can rush the passer, he can cover, he can tackle. He is a good sideline to sideline linebacker. And even though he doesn't play as often as maybe a Jack Campbell or an Alex Anzalone, he is a valuable piece to this defense. You could see the moment that Derek Barnes went down in that Arizona game, the tone shifted. The defense was a little bit less intense. They were a little bit less willing to run and tackle and hit and make the physical play and do the dirty work. And that is what he brings out of his teammates. That is where his value lies, on top of being a very productive linebacker, and that is why I have him almost cracking the top 10, but not quite. The first player to crack the top 10 at the 10th overall pick is Jameson Williams, a player that, yes, has only contributed one truly solid season to the Lions. 91 targets, 58 receptions, 1,001 yards, and 7 touchdowns through the air. However, when you consider the fact that his first year was really cut short due to the injury and his tearing of his ACL, his second year was littered with suspensions and injuries and nicks and knacks and just different things that didn't quite go his way. Jameson Williams came into the offseason last year and really improved. Took a massive step forward from his route running ability, a massive step forward from his hands, a massive step forward from his separation, and just the way he approached the game. And you could see it on tape. He was an entirely different player and came out in week 1 and had 100 yards and a touchdown. He was fantastic for the Detroit Lions last year. And even with seeing that 2-game suspension, even with missing time and having another disruptive factor in his early career, he still put up 1,000 yards and under 60 receptions, had 7 touchdowns in just under 60 receptions. He was fantastic, and I expect another good year from JMO, another good year after that, and potentially a 3-time 1,000-yard wide receiver by the time his rookie contract is up in Detroit. At number 9, I have the Lions' Sam Laporta, a second-round pick from just 2 seasons ago. Has played all 33 possible games for Detroit, 146 catches, 1,615 yards, and 17 touchdowns. A massive red zone threat his first season. Took a statistical step back his sophomore year, but was still one of the best tight ends in football, one of the best deep threats, one of the best vertical players, and one of the best tight ends in all of football, and stepped in that way immediately. I don't think he's made a Pro Bowl yet, but I wouldn't be surprised if that was on his horizon. And I think he has a very bright future in the NFL, a very bright future in Detroit, and so far, he has been one of the best players on the Lions roster as a second-round pick from Iowa. Another Hawkeye that cracks the top 10 is Jack Campbell. Has played all 34 of the 34 possible games for Detroit, including every single playoff game. He has 226 tackles, 10 tackles for loss, 3.5 sacks, 6 passes defended, and a forced fumble. Jack Campbell last season will never be appreciated enough for what he did. He single-handedly, along maybe with Kerby Joseph, kept that defensive front together. He was the biggest reason as to why the Detroit Lions finished as a top 10 scoring defense, the number 1 third down defense, and one of the best statistical defenses in football from a lot of major statistical categories. He kept that defense together. He was playing alongside guys like Ezekiel Turner and Anthony Pittman and Miles Adams on the front 7, and still kept the Detroit Lions defense relevant, still got them off the field on time. And even though it wasn't perfect, even though he hasn't gotten that interception yet, even though maybe he's not the same player we thought he could be out of Iowa, he is still an excellent playmaker, and I don't think will ever be appreciated in Detroit for what he truly does for this defense. Eli McNeel is another really good player, a player I have as the 7th best of the Brad Holmes era. He is a guy that unfortunately tore his ACL at the end of the 2024 season, but in 61 games has 137 tackles, 11.5 sacks, 22 TFLs, 27 quarterback hits, 3 passes defended, and 2 forced fumbles. He is one of the most disruptive interior defensive linemen in football. He is a great player who also got another really big contract, an extension from Brad Holmes, much like Derek Barnes. And when he's healthy and gets back on the field, he's going to remind everybody exactly why he is such a good player, exactly why he is so incredibly impactful, and we will see Eli McNeel return to top form in Detroit. Brian Branch cracks the top 6 with 31 games played, 183 tackles, 8 TFLs, 2 sacks, 29 passes defended, 2 forced fumbles, 7 interceptions, and a Pro Bowl to his name. He is one of the best players to ever come through the Brad Holmes draft class. He, I think, has all-pro upside. I think he has all-pro potential. He is one of the best safeties in football and is the partner to the best safety duo in football. That partner in question, well, that's Kerby Joseph, the number 5 player on this list with 49 games played, 247 tackles, 17 interceptions, 31 passes defended, 2 forced fumbles, and a fumble recovery. The most recent All-Pro of the Detroit Lions secondary is one of the best and most productive safeties in football. A lot of people are going to underestimate him. A lot of people are going to say that he's not the best player there is, but he is one of the best, most productive players in football, and nobody can take that away from him. He has been more productive than guys like Kyle Hamilton, more productive than guys in his own draft class like Jalen Petrie. He is one of the best safeties in football. He is now one of the highest paid safeties in football, and he has earned every penny of that contract. Top 3 players that we're going to talk about today are pretty obvious. So let's take a look at number 4, the obvious one here again. Jamir Gibbs, right? 32 games for the Detroit Lions, 2,357 rushing yards and 26 touchdowns on the ground, with over 833 receiving yards and 9 touchdowns through the air. He has been a phenomenal running back. He led the NFL in touchdowns a season ago. He is a future All-Pro top 3 running back in the NFL. And even as of today, he is a top 5 running back in the entirety of the league. Some people argue Bijan Robinson. Some people argue, guys like Derrick Henry, Saquon Barkley, Christian McCaffrey. The fact that he's even in those talks is a great place to be for the first place, but he is better than Bijan Robinson. I think he is better at this point in his career than Derrick Henry. He has solidified himself as a top 3 running back in football, and that is all you could ask of from a first-round pick. I don't think you could have gotten much more out of a running back in the first round. If there ever was going to be a running back to justify a top 15 pick, Jamir Gibbs is doing a really good job showing that he was exactly worth that value. Aiden Hutchinson is coming in at number 3 with 122 career tackles, 28.5 sacks, and 30 career TFLs. He would probably be number 2 on this list had he not been injured. He is a top 3 defensive end in football. He is one of the best players on the defensive line across the entire league. And had he not gotten hurt, he could have potentially set the all-time single season sack record for not only the Detroit Lions, but for the entirety of the NFL. He was on pace to do it. He is having a fantastic season. He would have easily hit 15, 16, 17 sacks and could have even pushed for 20 plus. He is one of the most disruptive players in football, and the Detroit Lions sorely missed him when he was gone. Amon-Ra St. Brown is number 2, a 4-year player, 4,851 yards, 33 touchdowns, 2-time All-Pro, 3-time Pro Bowler, top 5 wide receiver in football, and arguably the best value Brad Holmes has ever gotten out of the draft class. A 4th-round selection that turns into a 2-time All-Pro, one of the best receivers in football, one of the highest paid receivers in football. He is one of the best players to ever come out of the 4th round of the NFL draft, and that is not debatable. But the very best player is the very first player, where it all began, the pick that changed the culture, the pick that changed everything about Detroit's identity. That is, of course, Penei Sewell. The 7th overall pick in the 2021 draft class is the highest paid tackle in football. A 3-time Pro Bowler, a 2-time All-Pro, and the very best right tackle in football plays for the Detroit Lions. So with that being said, that is my list. That is my ranking of every single draft pick that Brad Holmes has ever made in his tenure with the Detroit Lions. Some good, some bad, very few actual true misses, a lot of role players, probably 10 to 15 players that you could truly say are stars in the making or solidified superstars already. So with that being said, thank you all so much for watching. Again, leave your list down in the comments below. Who was too high? Who was too low? What is your ranking for this list? I saw it on social media, so I wanted to do a spin on it. But let me know in the comments down below who is the best player, the worst player, and rank all of them if you'd like to in the comments down below. I'd love to take a look at them. I'd love to see them. With that being said, thank you all so much for watching. And until next time, and as always, go Lions.